Welcome everybody, this is Chandra Easton from Star Astrology Healing, speaking today about the next solar eclipse. We're having a total solar eclipse. It's the 2nd of July 2019, a couple of months away, but we live in momentous times, so I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of the eclipse and what it means on a national, a personal and a global level. Eclipses generally don't have a personal connection unless they activate very closely within a couple of degrees a planet in your chart, and that, or the midheaven or the ascendant. Now this eclipse that's coming up on the 2nd of July is falling in the 11th degree of Cancer. And the sign of Cancer is one of the cardinal signs. So if you were born the last week of June or the first week of July, then the eclipse will be falling around your sun and will have a very personal effect. Similarly, if you've got any other planets in that part of the sign of Cancer, then you'll be impacted. The eclipses are also affect people whose sun or ascendant or midheaven are on the cardinal signs, particularly in those middle degrees. So for instance, if you're a Libran born the last week of September, first week of October, then the eclipse will throw a challenge or a square to your identity. If you were born in the last week of December or the first week of January, you're a Capricorn, then the eclipse will be directly opposite your sun and therefore on your Dharma or a soul sensitive point in your chart. If you're born in the last week of March or the first week of April, then the eclipse, you're in Aries, then the eclipse will form a challenge to your identity and possibly to your health. It's very specific, the eclipses. We don't have a great range of orbs, so within a couple of degrees of a planet or within a couple of degrees, a very small orb of the ascendant or the midheaven. So what are the issues that an eclipse brings up? Well, an eclipse is when the sun and the moon conjoin in the heavens, forming a conjunction, and this points to a point of focus. And so the focus for an eclipse in the 11th degree of Cancer is to wake up, for humanity to wake up. It's very close to the fixed star Sirius, which is the eternal star of hope, and a star that's got a lot of connection to do with the increasing of light or the increasing of consciousness within individuals, within nations, within races, within humanity as a whole. So there's a wake-up call and a call to nurture and to treat others as we would like to be treated. The sign of Cancer is to do with the birthing of identity, birthing of light, birthing of soul consciousness, birthing of greater heart and greater love. So we just need to ask ourselves, where in our individual lives could we be more caring and concerned for family or community? Where does the nurturing, where is it out of balance? Now the eclipse is visible through the path of Umbra at 16 minutes past 11 Pacific Standard Time. That's in the South Pacific Ocean, and it's 17.5 degrees south of the equator and 109 degrees west of the Greenwich, the international date line. Yes, so because it falls in the middle of the ocean and the shadow of the eclipse arcs across the South Pacific, then it will activate the tectonic plate that is there, and this tectonic plate, even though it's west of South America, it's actually activating the Antarctic tectonic plate and the NAZCA, the Nazca tectonic plate. I don't begin to understand the impact that will have on the tectonic plates of the world, but I know that there's a school of thought that says that there's a lot of change happening and that the tectonic plates are on the move, and that therefore where the magnetic north and south pole once were is not where it is anymore, and that we've had pole shifts of smaller and larger degrees over the last 15 years or so that are moving, that are one of the impacts or one of the reasons why the poles are no longer in alignment. Now, there may be other reasons for this. It could be that the brown dwarf Nibiru, intergalactic visitor to our solar system, is pulling the Earth out of its magnetic alignment, and that could be the reason for the upheaval of the tectonic plates. But when I look at the chart, what I see is the planet Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, the South Node or the past karmic point in the sign of Capricorn, and the destiny point opposite the eclipse in the sign of Capricorn. So this lineup of points and planets in the sign of Capricorn indicates a fundamental restructure of the tectonic plates, of our magnetic alignment to the stars, a fundamental restructure of governments, a fundamental restructure of the role of men and women, the maternal and the paternal relationships. There's a fundamental restructure on many levels going on. A fundamental restructure of governments, of the monetary system. It's personal, it's geophysical, and it's global. All of those things. We've only got to look to the headlines to see what's happening in governments around the world, and the previous way of doing business, if you like, and running governments is up for change. And where that will lead, hopefully, will be to a greater nurturing and a greater caring and a greater sense of community responsibility for individuals, for governments and for nations. Yeah, so on a personal level, what kind of issues can we expect that the eclipse will bring up? Well, they will bring up issues of equality and justice and fairness in relationships, in work environments, within families, within society as a whole. So anywhere where there's a lack of equality, a lack of justice, lack of fairness, we've only got to look at the fact that women don't receive the same amount of money for the same amount of work and effort in Australia and in many parts of the world, to realise that this is one of the equality issues that is being. The idea is that we bring ourselves into alignment and change the things that are overdue for change. You could say that's because the eclipse falls in the 11th degree of Cancer, and it's got a very strong square to the Libra ascendant and strong oppositions to these planets in Capricorn. Then what we have effectively set up is a cardinal cross. And a cardinal cross brings big change and rapid change, and we either get on board and go with the change, or we get left behind. So governments will get left behind, relationships that aren't able to change quickly enough will get left behind. Families and communities need to redefine who's part of the family and who's not. I know here in Australia we have a conversation about, what it means to be Australian. And in the past, having been a colonial outpost of Britain, to be Australian in the last 200 years or, thereabouts has been to be white and to be privileged. This is no longer the case. This is not what it means to be Australian in the 21st century. We are a nation born of immigrants, born of people from all over the world, and we need to readjust our national identity. So looking at one's individual identity and looking at the national identity and bringing government policies and things like fair work for fair pay, irrespective of your race, your creed, your gender. These are the kinds of issues that are urgently need restructuring. And so everybody needs to attend to this. Another area, because of the Capricorn, is who holds the power and who holds the money, and the gap between the rich and the poor, that in Australia certainly has been extending and expanding, so that we have increasingly more homelessness and more poverty and more dispossession, and increasingly we have pockets in the Australian example. We have very rich millionaires or billionaires who've made their money out of the resources sector, of the coal and the various things that have been dug out of the earth, and that this has created obscene amounts of wealth in some sectors of our society, and conversely there's a great amount of poverty in other sectors and a great amount of homelessness. So these inequalities around money, around housing, around fairness and justice, and around the national identity, they're up for review, not just in Australia, that's just where I live, but everywhere. We need to review what it means to be Spanish, what it means to be Scandinavian, what it means to be a Pacific Islander, and begin to think of the family of man, the family of humanity, rather than our individual, separate nationalistic agendas. Yeah, so there's lots of areas for change. As I said, it will particularly impact those born in those dates that I mentioned, because it's around the 11th degree of the cardinal signs. So if you have any planets or your ascendant or your midheaven around the 11th degree of the cardinal signs, well then this eclipse has got your name on it. If I compare the eclipse to the Australian chart, I'll just talk for a minute. The fact that the eclipse chart has Libra, the sign of justice and equality and fairness, and also the sign that rules the board of karma on the ascendant. And Libra is ruled esoterically by the planet Uranus, the light bringer, the light bearer. And Uranus is wending its way slowly but surely through the sign of Taurus. Now, in the Australian chart that we use as the nativity for Australian Federation, which came from the 1st of January 1901, the moon's in Taurus. It's a fairly conservative sign, and it's a sign that indicates that there's been a certain amount of wealth and privilege in this country from its inception. Initially it was the graziers, and then it was they used to say that Australia rode on the sheep's back, and then it was the resources boom and sector. And of course those that hold money and power and privilege don't often like to give it up. Now, Uranus is currently in the 6th degree of Taurus, and the moon in the Federation chart is in the 21st degree. Now, it's going to take until March 2024 for Uranus to arrive at the moon. And what will happen, and so that's, 4 years away, a bit less than 4 years away. Hopefully this inequality and this sort of, privilege and money held in the hands of a few will be blown apart, and there'll be a redistribution. Now, what we'd like to see is that the government reflects the will of the people, and that equality and justice and fairness, irrespective of colour, race, creed, social status, that there's a redistribution of this wealth. If not, then there would be a financial or an economic collapse, March 2024. Yeah, other things that I notice with the eclipse, when I compare the eclipse chart and I superimpose it in the bi-wheel around the Federation chart, the eclipse falls in the 3rd house. This is associated with skills and education and communication. So I would say that what we have to nurture is the younger generations, and nurture the people who are looking after children. This can be mothers, this can be fathers, this can be childcare workers, but create an environment that's nurturing for education. And therefore, this brings us back to the equality. If childcare is too expensive and can't be afforded, then women are not able to have an equal and just fair of the opportunities that society offers. So we need childcare support. We need just, fair policies that apply to women. We need fathers to be able to have more time out when their children are born rather than the sort of token a couple of weeks. We need to extend these periods and value and validate the nurturing process of the young, and do that from a bottom-up approach, really overhaul the primary school and the preschool sector, and the role of women, and the role of women in nurturing, and the role of men in nurturing, and turn the traditional view of families on its head and come again in a new and different way. This is in the Australian chart where the eclipse falls in the third house. And I think also the eclipse is the sun, the moon, Vulcan, the spiritual destiny point, and the midheaven, all in the sign of Cancer. So education has to include the right brain. It can't just be about the 3 R's, and it can't just be from a white privileged perspective. We need to learn about the community of people who we live in the midst of, and this therefore brings me to the issue of the lack of recognition of the First Nations people, and the Makarrata, the need for us to go through a process of acknowledging the frontier wars that happened here in Australia, and begin to listen to the voice of the First Nation people here in Australia, the Aboriginal people. There are so many issues associated with where this lineup of planets in Cancer around the eclipse falls in the third house. Another one that I could speak to is homelessness and the growing divide of wealth between those who have nowhere to live. I think immediately of the people in greatest risk of homelessness in Australia are women over 55, I think it is, who, for whatever reason, be it divorce, be it illness, be it a loss of job or income, they don't have the superannuation, they don't have the family home, and they end up homeless. But homelessness is also an issue for the youth, disaffected youth. Homelessness or the breakdown of community is an issue in Indigenous communities. So the homelessness issue is a big issue. The embracing, nurturing education of the young is a big issue. And I think the creating a society where we protect and support the most vulnerable. This could be the people with a disability, it could be the aged care sector. All of these things are up for attention in the Australian chart. I'll continue to look. In the eclipse chart, Jupiter is sitting in Sagittarius with a very tight square to Neptune. There's a lot of delusion going on. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of separation. There's a lot of head in the sand avoidance of big issues. You could say there's aspects of our society that recognise that we need to restructure and bring in more equality and justice and nurturing and fairness, and there are other aspects of our society that don't want to know about this, that want to put the head in the sand or want to spin lies about it and want to evade the issues or want to deny on the base of race or colour or creed. This is an issue for the planet. In the Australian chart, Jupiter falls right on top, well, just past actually, 2 degrees past our natal Uranus. And so we are overdue for putting into practice. I mean, Australians love to think that we are the epitome of the fair go. But in fact, there's a lot of racism. And it's not buried, it's been erupting out and from all sectors. And so we need to acknowledge this and change. Simple as that. Just change our intellectual and our mental and our emotional prejudices that are blocking all the people who could have a fair go from getting a fair go. This has been quite a theme in our current election cycle that's running, but what a fair go means to one political party is a different thing to what a fair go means to another. Yeah, we all have our blinkers and our, blind spots, areas that we can't see problems, but being willing to recognise that not one individual or one party has the answer, but to, broaden our parameters of what is acceptable in society. This is important, and particularly I think for the older generation, the younger generation. Broadly speaking, you could say there's more tolerance, there's more of a global view. It's the older generation who have trouble keeping a pace. Yes, I think I've said pretty much everything that I wanted to say. I guess what I would say is that because of the Libra ascendant and the chart rulership from Uranus, therefore we are this eclipse simply continues the trend that what happens with an eclipse, I should have said this earlier, is that an eclipse lasts 3 years, and some eclipses build up slowly, some fluctuate, and some are very dynamic with waves of dynamic change. This particular eclipse in the South Pacific brings waves of dynamic change. Of course, what I haven't talked about is the rising oceans, whether that's coming from global warming, whether it's because of the magnetic pull from Nibiru or other intergalactic visitors. The end result's the same. Life on certain islands in the ocean is becoming increasingly unsustainable. Now, this is the South Pacific, 17 degrees south, so I'm not sure exactly which islands, but the general rise of sea levels and the resultant economic and social and political upheaval. I mean, here in the South Pacific we regularly have conversations between the governments of the South Pacific Islanders who are desperate to bring about change and to be heard, because pretty soon they will be homeless. Their islands are being swallowed up. Yep, that's one of the very many global issues. What's that saying, think globally, act locally? We can't, there are so many issues, whether it's that the poles are moving, whether it's that there's systemic racism around the planet, whether it's the fact that multinationals fund war. There are so many issues, but we have to look to our local community and look to our local families and say, well, what are the areas where we can bring more justice, more equality, more care and nurture for the dispossessed? Because in the bigger picture, we are in the midst of the great change, and the great change spans. The great change is a birthing of consciousness, a birthing of light, a birthing of a new civilization that spans many hundreds of years. And the eclipses are just indicators of these, you could say that they're indicators of the contractions and the birthing pains of the birthing of new consciousness. It doesn't happen in a decade, it probably won't happen in 100 years, it may not happen in 200 years. It's an ongoing process. We are birthing greater light. And we all have an opportunity to do this, and those who want to keep their heads in the sand and who don't want to be part of the birthing of light and the birthing of hope on the planet, well, their soul will have another direction and another choice awaiting them. But those who value and appreciate life on earth and would like to continue life on earth in this incarnation and future incarnations, well, those people will hear and respond to the call of this eclipse that comes from the heart of Sirius, and therefore the heart of the world mothers, to maintain hope and to radiate hope and to share our home, our physical home, our community home, our spiritual home, the earth as our home. To share the home. Okay, I think that's probably all I might say. I didn't even really talk about the things like Brexit and the world economy, but that's all part of the changing of the way we've done business on Earth. If you'd like to know more about global matters, you can have a look at my YouTube channel. There are many videos there, some meditations, some more political videos, associated talks about the changing 21st century. If you'd like to understand what on earth is going on in your life and what the changes are that are personally impacting you, that's what I do. I work regularly with people both on a personal level, and I also work through Skype with people all over the world to help you understand the meaning of your life through esoteric astrology, and how you can more easily and better cooperate with the light of your higher self. I do natal charts. I help people look ahead at the year ahead. That's useful for, it could be starting a new business, it could be dealing with a health crisis, it could be understanding the dynamics of a relationship. There's many, many facets and ways esoteric astrology can be used. I've been an esoteric astrologer since 1978, beg your pardon. I started studying, and it's been my life work. Okay, this is Chandra Easton from StarAstrologyHealing.com. Nice to connect. Bye for now.